everyone. Great to be here. Hi,
Good
Warrick.
morning.
Morning, everyone. So we are going to dive right in. There are a lot of things that we're going to talk about the art of the workplace optimization, everything related to flexibility, growth, and obviously AI. So Warrick, I wanted to start by you introducing a little bit about your career, your growth, what you do at Snowflake, and also Snowflake's growth in the last few years.
Sure, yeah. So, thank you for having me here today. I don't actually have a background in real estate. I've been in the real estate workplace side of things for around 15 years. But my background is really in operations, so business operations. So I've predominantly been in high growth companies or hyper growth companies. Prior to Snowflake, I was with Tesla for many years and grew out their real estate portfolio. But more importantly, and right prior to Tesla, I was with a company called SolarCity and helped build SolarCity from an operations perspective, from a startup to what was then at the time the largest solar company in the world. And really that was more of an operational challenge than it was a real estate challenge. So that's the perspective that I bring to when I think about how we're going to grow and support the expansion of the company through real estate. So it's more of an operational lens that I look at things through than it is a pure, real estate or workplace lens. So obviously, clearly, I have to surround myself with very good people that have very, lots of experience in both real estate and workplace to bring that domain expertise that I lack. But I think that's one of the powers that I bring, is that I'm able to look at it from a what are we trying to solve for here lens, rather than just pure real estate lens. Snowflake, for those that don't know, the data company. We are a little over 10 years old. Our product went into general availability 10 years ago last week, and we went public 5 years ago last week. So pretty new company. When I joined, we were, I think, about 1,500 people. And that was 6.5 years ago. And we're at around about 10,000 today. So some pretty significant growth in the last 6.5 years. And obviously in the middle there, we had COVID. So, my challenge when I joined was to really support that hypergrowth. We all knew that we were going to be growing quickly, and so how would we support that growth and solve for the challenges that were coming? And so that's been a key part of my role is thinking through that and addressing those challenges over the last, as I say, 6.5 years.
And we cannot talk about Snowflake without talking about data, as you said. So
absolutely,
would be curious to hear about the data points that you're looking at and the data to make decisions, and also talk about employee experience, and a little bit about how did it change throughout the course of this hypergrowth.
Yeah. So obviously, when I first started 6.5 years ago, we had one office in the valley here, just south of here. And since then, we've grown to be in most countries in the world, have a presence of some sort in most countries of the world. And yeah, we're a data company. So I think really pre-COVID, it's fair to say that we weren't leveraging data overly much to drive real estate and workplace decisions, predominantly because we were just moving so quickly. And we didn't have the time, and I didn't have the resources to really channel into thinking about how can we strategically think through and leverage data to make decisions. COVID was an opportunity for us to take a deep breath, probably like many of you here, and rethink how we approach things. And during the period of COVID, when no one was in the office, we were, and our engineers were beavering away, working with us on how can we leverage data to drive decision making, not only in my world but in many parts of the company. And there was a real shift in leveraging data within Snowflake, kind of eating our own dog food, so to speak, to drive decision making. Say not only in real estate and workplace, but in every aspect of the company. So HR, IT, marketing, most every part of the company is deeply leveraging data and applications built on data to drive decision making. So it's an absolutely critical part of how we think about things, how we analyze things, and how we optimize. And also, it's enabled us to be very lean in terms of resources as well. Rather than build out large teams to solve problems, we've been able to leverage, data and applications built on top of data to really keep our team quite lean.
And, as a follow-up to that, I think you mentioned about being lean, also being flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And there is the constant push and pull. And I think with everyone that I've talked to, there is, how do we consolidate? How do we optimize real estate on the one hand, but also how do we support innovation in our spaces? Those things might even collide in some sense. So curious,
Mm-hmm.
from your perspective, how do you look at it? How do you work on that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we started with when I first joined 6.5 years ago, we had one office down in the valley here, and nothing pretty much anywhere else. And so as we grew, one of the things that we recognized quite quickly is leveraging the kind of managed service office, flex offices, as a way to both provide a solution for our local workforce, but also to, and this is more post-COVID, I suppose, but more to gather data about how people are using offices, where they're using them. So we will often not go into a market and open up an office immediately. We will leverage a platform like Gable, for example, who provide access to flex offices and give our local employees the ability to book spaces that make sense for them wherever they need them. And on the back end, we're gathering the data about how they utilize, which spaces they're using the most, what kinds of use cases they're solving for through the spaces that they're booking. And that is helping us inform what we would do from an office perspective when we eventually have enough momentum in that market to warrant either leasing a space or doing a deal for a dedicated managed service office. So we use that approach in all emerging markets. Most recently, Seoul in Korea, for example. We've got, I think it's around about 60 people there now, but that has grown very quickly in the last 18 months from pretty much nothing. And so when we first started in Seoul, Korea, we basically gave the local employees access to Gable. They book spaces through WeWork or Regus or any of the other managed service operators that are in that market. We analyzed all the data on the back end, and then it drove decision making about where we're going to put the office, the type of office, the nature of the space that we were going to build out. And we're in this process right now building out a new office there. It's around about 40,000 square feet, and we'll open up later next year. So it's a big part of our decision-making process and analysis of spaces using flex offices. Once we get past the flex office stage and have got a dedicated space, then obviously that's where understanding how the spaces are being used globally. What are the use cases that are going to be in, for example, the Seoul office, and what have we learned from other offices elsewhere where that can apply to Seoul? So we've obviously got similar teams in offices around the world, sales, marketing, etc. So we're looking at the use cases for those discrete teams, and then to understand how those people are using space. And that informs how we'll design Seoul. And so it's a constant iterative process. I would say that no one of our offices is perfect. Even the most recent ones that we've opened, for example, this year, many of you have probably read that we opened up a large building in Bellevue, and more recently, almost 1 million square feet in Menlo Park. But neither of those offices are perfect in any way, shape, or form, because we're always iterating, we're always learning, and we're always adapting. So, we gather data on all of the use cases, as I mentioned, we apply it to the latest office, and then we look at what we've done in that latest office, which is what we're doing now with Bellevue and Menlo Park, for example, and taking that learning and adjusting that and applying that to where we're going to go next, which right now we're working on Berlin, so a very large office in Berlin, engineering, Menlo Park's engineering, Bellevue's engineering. So how do engineers in those two spaces use their space? What do they do when they're at the office? What do they like? What do they don't like? And we're applying a lot of that learning to how we're thinking about the new Berlin office, which will open at the end of next year.
And as a continuum to that, of the data-driven decision making, we have to talk about AI and implementations of AI. And I think it's probably top of mind for every person here is how do I leverage AI to both scale myself, my team in terms of the optimization of space, decision-making process, but also employee experience. So curious from your perspective, how do you implement AI across?
Well, AI starts with data.
Correct.
So without good data, there's pretty much no point in doing anything AI related. So that was the first step, which obviously has been a process over the last several years, is cleaning up a lot of the data that we gather. It's coming in from a lot of different sources. As Lisa knows, as one of our vendors, we require all of our vendors to provide access to the underlying data that they're gathering. And we feed all of that into Snowflake. So imagine a large database where all of these pipes are coming in with discrete data from not just a real estate perspective, but lots of other functionality as well. And so the first thing that we obviously needed to do is to make sure that that data is clean, organized, and structured so that we can build AI solutions on top of it. And then we started small. So the first AI solution that we built within my team was to give our employees access to the underlying workplace knowledge bases that many of you have. Things like policies, for example, simple stuff like locations and addresses, answers to the most frequently asked questions, or reporting problems. And so we built an AI solution on top of that knowledge base that allowed them to query all of that in a natural language way and delve into that data. So that clearly had a resource impact as well, because the number of tickets that were coming in, or the number of queries or Slack messages or whatever to our team absolutely plummeted, because people can go in through the various portals through which they can access this tool. The most used one is Slack. So there's a natural language bot on Slack, an AI bot on Slack, and they can go in and they can type in, I want to do an event in Menlo Park next Tuesday for 30 people, and I want to provide food. Can you support this? And the system will come back with answers for you, and it will basically take care of the entire booking and notification process. So obviously there's a lot of people involved in making sure that we're supporting an event. So all of that would happen in the back end without anybody needing to do anything. And it's all driven by AI at the front end, allowing you to do natural language queries and then filter it based on, applying some preferences or changes to what it is you want to do. So that's how we started. Since then, we've built a number of other solutions. We've built an AI platform or an AI solution on top of our real estate administration solution. And so rather than me go in and delve into that lease admin tool, which is probably my least popular tool to use, I can just type in natural language, tell me about all of the leases that have some sort of key notification event happening in the next 6 months. And it will give me the answers to that. And then I can go filter that and say, okay, which of those have some form of extension option on them, and what are the terms of that extension option? And it'll come back and and give me the answers to that. So simple, relatively simple solutions, but solving for what otherwise would be fairly time-consuming and somewhat painful in terms of dealing with the underlying platform that the data is coming from, solutions. It just made our lives a lot easier and allowed our resources to be a little bit more optimized. And we've used that approach in a number of different areas. So we have another tool that's built on top of our utilization platform. So we're gathering, obviously, like many of you, gathering a lot of utilization data. The simplest one, obviously, is badging. when people badge in and out of the office. But obviously layering on top of that, things like sensor data, Wi-Fi hotspot data, food and beverage consumption data, and we built some simple AI solutions on top of that to start and build personas. And so now we've got this kind of catalog of personas, people personas. So and how they are using Workspace and what are they doing when they're at the office? Where are they spending most of their time? How much time do they spend at lunch? What do they like to eat at lunch? What do they don't like to eat at lunch? What kind of meeting rooms do they tend to gravitate towards? Why are they gravitating towards those meeting rooms? So that kind of stuff you can start to glean. I would say that a lot of that latter stuff is very much still in the development phase, but we're starting to see some glimmers or rays of hope, I suppose, that could be a pretty powerful solution for us as well to better understand how our spaces are being used and inform, design going forward.
And I think you talked a little bit about, how people are using the space, and there is a lot of focus, and even the previous conversation discussed hospitality, team collaboration, employee experience in that aspect. How do you measure the effectiveness of your offices in terms of gathering and team collaboration?
Yeah, I think there's really two ways. One is what I just talked about, which is the data itself. Measuring everything you can measure in as an efficient way as possible. And the other way, which the previous speaker spoke about, is talking to people and spending time with them. One of the things that I'm very lucky is that when I joined Snowflake, as I mentioned, we were very small. And one of the key demands, I suppose, is probably the best way to put it, that I had when I joined Snowflake was that I had a seat at the table among the executive team. And so we, as in the executive team, make group decisions about our real estate. It's not just a me decision. And that gives you buy-in right from the get-go, right? So in terms of how you're thinking about solving for a particular market or a particular problem. So that was absolutely critical. But listening to people, and that starts obviously with the executive team, but more importantly, going out and talking to our employees. Like the previous speaker, I spend quite a lot of time on airplanes, traveling around the world, visiting our various offices. And I also travel alone. And in most of those places, with the exception of my workplace team, I probably don't know anybody. I've spoken to them perhaps on Zoom and had the odd meeting with them, but I don't know a lot of the people there. So, you land in that office and you sit and you have lunch with people and you talk about, what's going great for them and what is not so great. And, what do you like about your space and what do you not like about your space? And we just listen. And I will also sit in meetings, larger team gatherings. I'll be a fly on the wall in a lot of things going on around the office to better understand, how people are perceiving their workplace and what can we do better. And as I mentioned way back, it's a constant learning process. There's never a right answer. There's always something that you can improve upon. And so every time that we do something, we learn and, we adapt and we channel that back into our thinking about how are we going to solve, the next time we go out and build out a new office or, we expand a team in a given office or whatever, how are we going to solve for those guys and what can we do differently that we did from last time that didn't quite work out. And so it's a constant, iterative process.
I think it actually leads me to my final question about managing stakeholders and cross-functional teams. Real estate usually sits between finance and people and works very closely.
Yep.
How do you manage, the workplace strategy with those two stakeholders in hand?
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, it's more than that. I sit within the finance org, so I report to our CFO. But I meet with the exec team every quarter and talk about real estate strategy. We're looking, like many of you, if you're thinking about a new office someplace, you're probably looking at least 2 years out, which is what we're looking, typically 2 years out. And so, we're thinking about, what are we going to be solving for 2 years out? And those are the types of discussions that we're having at the executive level. Then I get with, the HR or marketing or engineering leadership. And because if we're solving for those particular groups in that market, then, we need to understand a little bit more about, their requirements. So, Snowflake is a pretty flat organization, I would say. So, if you want to go and talk to Sridhar, our CEO, he'll welcome you with open arms to sit down and have a chat. So I wouldn't say that I'm pretty lucky. I wouldn't say that the real estate workplace function lives solely within finance and there's a bunch of walls around us, because there aren't. We are a key part of supporting Snowflake's growth, and real estate and workplace and our offices are seen as a strategic asset. They are absolutely critical for attracting the right people to the company. You can't grow a company as quickly as we have without the right people to make that happen. And then we need to keep those people. We need to retain them and make sure they're happy, productive. And so, making sure that we are doing our job to support that means that we have to have relationships across the entire company and the buy-in of the entire company to make sure that we can, we can solve for their needs and wants.
Thank you, Warrick. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.